Hey everyone! Today I'm going to tell you the story of one of the most iconic films ever made, Titanic. The RMS Titanic was the largest and most luxurious ship of its time, attracting the wealthiest passengers from around the world. During its maiden voyage, the ship's builders and Captain Edward Smith boldly claimed it was unsinkable, even suggesting that not even God could sink it. But fate had other plans. With over 2,200 passengers aboard, tragedy struck when the Titanic collided with a massive iceberg in the North Atlantic. Among those on board were Jack Dawson, a free-spirited artist, and Rose DeWitt Bukater, a young woman from high society. Despite their different worlds, they fell deeply in love, defying social norms and Rose's controlling fiancé, Caledon Hockley. Their romance unfolded across the ship's grand halls and hidden corners. But as the Titanic began to sink, their love was put to the ultimate test. Jack's sacrifice and Rose's survival became a symbol of enduring love and loss. So, if you want to experience a story of passion, tragedy, and timeless devotion, watch Titanic. Let's dive into the tale that still echoes through the deep sea. Years after the Titanic's tragic sinking, renowned treasure hunter Brock Levitt set out on a daring mission to explore the wreck deep beneath the icy Atlantic Ocean. Aboard a high-tech research vessel, his team searched for a priceless gem, the heart of the ocean, a rare blue diamond. Said to have vanished with the ship in 1912, legends claimed it belonged to a wealthy passenger's wife, and its present-day value was estimated at over $400 million. With advanced submersibles, underwater drones, and robotic arms outfitted with high-definition cameras, the team descended into the silent grave of the Titanic. As they maneuvered their equipment through the twisted, rusted remains, they marveled at how much of the ship remained eerily intact after all these decades beneath the sea. They guided robotic probes through eerie hallways, collapsed ceilings, and ghostly staterooms. Among the haunting artifacts they uncovered were shoes, suitcases, dolls, and other relics of lives once lived. Then, their search led them to a locked safe lodged in the debris. With great care, they hauled it to the surface, hearts pounding in anticipation. Back on deck, the safe was pried open. But to their dismay, it contained no jewel, only a soggy, fragile sheet of paper. Disappointment filled the air like fog. Brock had poured time, money, and hope into this mission, risking his reputation and funding. The crew stood in silence, stunned, their excitement evaporating in seconds. But as one of them gently peeled the paper apart and carefully wiped away the grime, something remarkable emerged. A pencil sketch of a nude young woman, elegant and serene, captured with stunning realism. Her eyes were calm, her posture confident. Most striking of all, around her neck shimmered the unmistakable heart of the ocean. Gasps filled the room. The mood shifted instantly from defeat to fascination. This was no ordinary drawing. It was a clue. A beginning. Suddenly, the loss turned into a mystery. Who was the woman in the drawing? Why was she wearing the diamond? And what happened to her? Closer inspection revealed a signature and a date, April 14, 1912, the day before the Titanic struck the iceberg and met its fate. The world watched live as Brock Levitt's team explored Titanic's wreckage, searching for the mysterious heart of the ocean. Far away, in a quiet home filled with sunlight and clay sculptures, an elderly woman named Rose Dawson Calvert sat crafting by hand. Her television played softly in the background until something caught her ear. She turned her head. A sketch was shown on screen. Her eyes widened. "Turn that up, dear," she told her granddaughter. "That's me," she whispered. She contacted Brock's ship via satellite with the help of her granddaughter. After a moment of stunned silence, Brock listened as the old woman calmly stated, "The woman in that drawing is me." Skepticism followed. One of Brock's colleagues warned him she could be lying for attention. What if she just wants her 15 minutes of fame? But Brock wasn't convinced by the doubts. There was something about her voice. Within hours, a helicopter arrived and brought Rose out to the expedition vessel in the middle of the sea. To everyone's surprise, she didn't come alone. She brought boxes filled with trinkets, drawings, old mirrors, fragments of a past life. A woman of memories, of hobbies, of stories untold. They welcomed her aboard, gently settled her in, and brought her to Brock's private quarters. There, she was shown a computer-generated simulation of Titanic's final moments, how it struck the iceberg and sank. Rose watched it silently, then said with a faint smile, "That's a very good forensic analysis." But that's not how it happened. Then, as recovered artifacts were laid before her, brushes, shoes, combs, Rose's eyes filled with emotion. These weren't just relics to her, they were hers. And so, standing in the middle of the North Atlantic, she began to tell the story no one else could, the night Titanic died, and the love that lived through it. 84 years ago, the Titanic stood tall at the port, preparing for her maiden voyage across the Atlantic. It was a historic moment. Thousands gathered at the docks, desperate to catch a glimpse of the magnificent ship. Tickets were nearly impossible to come by, and only the wealthy or exceptionally lucky managed to secure a place on board. Some were born into privilege. Others had to gamble for a chance. In a smoky pub near the docks, a young man named Jack Dawson was deep in a game of poker. The stakes were high. 2 tickets aboard the Titanic. With a lucky hand and a burst of adrenaline, Jack and his Italian friend Fabrizio won the game. Their prize, 2 third-class tickets on the greatest ship ever built. They didn't have money or fancy clothes, but they had something better: adventure, freedom, and a way home to America. Meanwhile, just across town, a polished car rolled up to the docks. From it stepped a stunning young woman, Rose DeWitt Bukater, age 17. Elegant, poised, and visibly burdened, she was accompanied by her aristocratic fiancé Cal Hockley and her overbearing mother, Ruth. Theirs was a life of diamonds and expectations. But beneath Rose's graceful exterior was a young woman suffocating in silence. To the world, she looked like royalty. Inside, she felt like a prisoner. As Jack and Fabrizio ran joyfully toward the gangway, waving their tickets like golden keys, Rose stepped onto the ship like a porcelain doll being placed into a glass case. 2 worlds had boarded the same ship, one from the gutters of life, one from its golden cage. And neither knew their fates were about to collide aboard the unsinkable Titanic. The moment had arrived. Crowds swarmed the docks. Thousands upon thousands gathered to witness the launch of a legend. The Titanic, the grandest ship ever built, stood like a floating palace, ready to sail into history. For many, it was the ship of dreams. Those who couldn't board waved from a distance, arms high, bidding farewell to loved ones in a marvel they'd never step aboard. On the upper deck, Jack Dawson and Fabrizio leaned against the railings, waving with wild grins, not to anyone they knew, but to the world itself. They were just happy to be there, lucky winners in a game of fate. Jack and Fabrizio, tired but thrilled, flopped onto their bunks. With a deep horn blast, Titanic set sail into the open sea. Up on the bridge, Captain Smith turned to his officers with a smile. "She's fast. Let's see what she can do." Engines roared to life. The voyage had begun, carving her path through the endless sea. Meanwhile, Jack and his friend Fabrizio made their way to the very front of the Titanic. Standing at the bow, they watched in awe as the ship sliced through the ocean, its massive hull parting the waves with unstoppable force. Never before had mankind witnessed such a colossal vessel gliding so gracefully across the sea. Passengers gathered along the rails, marveling at the engineering wonder beneath their feet. Below, Jack saw dolphins dancing through the waves, leading the Titanic. Caught in the thrill, he climbed the railing, arms outstretched, shouting, "I'm the king of the world." For a fleeting moment, he felt unstoppable. In the lavish first-class dining room, Cal dined with Rose and her mother, Ruth, among the ship's elite. When Rose lit a cigarette, Ruth scolded her, and Cal silently crushed it. Frustrated, Rose left the table and stepped onto the deck, seeking solitude beneath the stars. The cold wind bit at her skin, but it felt freer than the air inside. Elsewhere on the ship, Jack and his friend Fabrizio sat together on a bench in third class. Jack, deeply focused, sketched a father and daughter nearby, his pencil gliding effortlessly across the page. Drawing was his one true passion, the only thing that ever felt like home. As he glanced up, his eyes caught Rose standing on the first-class deck. Her elegance stunned him. He stared, captivated, unable to look away. Rose noticed and shifted uncomfortably under his gaze. Fabrizio nudged him. "Forget it, Jack. She's first-class way out of reach." But Jack kept watching, drawn to something he couldn't explain. Rose's fiancé Cal led her back inside, but the stifling atmosphere and rigid expectations overwhelmed her. Surrounded by wealth yet stripped of freedom, she felt trapped in a life she didn't choose. Desperate, she fled to the deck, running through the cold night air. Nearby, Jack lay on a bench, gazing at the stars. He noticed someone rush past. Curious, he followed and was stunned to see the same girl from earlier, now climbing the railing, ready to leap into the sea. Without thinking, Jack stepped forward, his voice cutting through the wind. As Rose stood on the edge of the ship, ready to leap into the dark Atlantic, a voice called out behind her. "Don't do it," Jack said firmly, not even by mistake. Startled, Rose turned and warned him, "Don't come any closer. If you do, I'll jump." But Jack ignored her threat and slowly stepped forward. "Look, I'm not saying I'll stop you. If you jump, that's your choice. But I'll have to jump in after you, not because I want to, but because I'd have to try and save you." He paused, eyes steady. "I can swim, sure. Maybe I won't drown, but the water's freezing. We won't die fast, we'll freeze slowly. It'll be painful, a long, cold death." As he spoke, Jack began removing his shoes and jacket, preparing to dive in. Rose listened, her fear growing. She hadn't thought about the cold or the slow agony of freezing. She just wanted it to end quickly. His words struck her like thunder in a silent sky. Slowly, with trembling breath and a heart pounding in her chest, she stepped back from the edge, the cold wind tugging at her dress. Jack extended his hand, steady and calm, his eyes locked on hers. "Come on," he said softly, "let me help you." Rose hesitated, her fingers twitching, then turned eyes wide, soul torn, ready to climb back over the railing and return to the world she nearly left behind. Rose turned to climb back, but her dress snagged. She slipped and screamed. Jack lunged, caught her hand, and pulled her into his arms. As Jack pulled Rose back over the railing, she collapsed against him, trembling. Her scream had drawn the attention of nearby crew members, and within moments, 2 security officers rushed to the scene. Seeing Rose in Jack's arms, they assumed the worst, that he had attacked her. Before Jack could explain, they restrained him. Moments later, Cal arrived, furious, demanding answers. Jack was accused of misconduct and placed under arrest. As the officers began to escort Jack away, Rose found her voice. "Stop," she cried. "He didn't do anything wrong. He saved me." All eyes turned to her. "I was leaning over to see the propeller and slipped. Jack pulled me back. He saved my life." The officers exchanged glances. One of them nodded slowly. "Then this young man's a hero." Jack was released. As Cal prepared to leave with Rose, an officer remarked, "A man saves your fiancé's life. Shouldn't he be rewarded?" Cal, reluctant but pressured, offered Jack some money. Rose frowned. "That's all? For saving my life?" Embarrassed, Cal handed Jack more and extended an invitation to dine with them the next evening. As they walked away, Cal's valet, Mr. Lovejoy, lingered. Jack, brushing off his shirt, asked for a cigarette. Lovejoy handed one over with a smirk. "Funny thing, isn't it? A girl nearly falls off a ship, and to save her, you had to strip down." Jack said nothing, just lit the cigarette and stared out at the sea, the night wind brushing past like a whisper of what was to come. The next morning, Rose found Jack on the deck to thank him. Jack smiled and asked gently, "Why were you going to jump?" "You have everything: luxury, beauty, a future. Why throw it away?" Rose hesitated, then opened up. "Everyone around me is cold, controlled. They're rich, yes, but trapped by rules and appearances. I don't belong in that world." She held up her hand, showing him the engagement ring. "I'm engaged to Cal. We're to be married in America, but don't love him." "I never have." Jack, curious, asked, "Then why marry him? Do you love him at all?" Rose's expression shifted. Irritated, she snapped, "You don't get to ask about my personal life." Jack blinked, confused. To him, it was just a question, simple, honest. But Rose grew more agitated, her voice rising as she argued with him. Then, without another word, she turned and walked away. Jack stood there, stunned, feeling foolish. He didn't understand what he'd said wrong, only that something had shifted between them, and he couldn't quite name it, like a shadow passing silently between 2 strangers. That night, in the quiet of her stateroom, Cal entered and gently placed a dazzling necklace around Rose's neck, the legendary heart of the ocean, a 56-carat blue diamond. As it sparkled against her skin, he whispered, "This once belonged to Lucidus Keen's queen. Now it's yours, because I love you." He stepped closer, his voice softening. "Just open your heart to me even once, and you'll see how deeply I care." Rose, caught between duty and doubt, felt a flicker of warmth stir within her. For a brief moment, Cal's gesture and words pierced the walls she'd built, and something like affection stirred in her guarded heart. The next morning, as Rose wandered the upper deck, she spotted Jack again, this time with a worn sketchbook in his hands. Curious, she playfully snatched it from him. "Let's see what you're hiding." she teased, flipping it open. Inside were pages filled with stunning pencil sketches, portraits, street scenes, glimpses of life from around the world. Rose was captivated. "You drew all these?" she asked, wide-eyed. Jack nodded. "Yeah, I love to draw. These are people I met in different cities' faces that stuck with me." She paused on one recurring figure, a woman drawn several times. "Is she your girlfriend?" Rose asked, raising an eyebrow. Jack chuckled. "No, she was a prostitute in Paris. I paid her to pose. That's all." Rose laughed, surprised by his honesty. She found herself opening up, drawn to his free spirit. Jack, in turn, shared his story how he'd lost both parents young, how he wandered from city to city, sketching and surviving. Now, for the first time in years, he was heading home to America. Rose listened, fascinated. Jack's life was wild and untethered, so different from her own, bound by rules and expectations. She envied his freedom, his ability to live like a bird in flight. As they talked, something shifted. They laughed, they listened, and in that quiet morning light, a friendship began to bloom, one built not on status, but on shared longing for something more, something real, something neither of them had ever known. That evening, as Rose returned to her room, she found Jack waiting nearby. Just then, one of her mother's well-dressed friends strolled past and paused. "Aren't you the young man who saved Rose's life?" she asked. "There's a formal dinner tonight." "What will you wear?" Jack shrugged. "This," he said, gesturing to his worn clothes. She smiled and led him to her suite, offering a suit that had belonged to her son, who luckily was Jack's size. When Jack stepped out, polished and tailored, he looked every bit the part of a gentleman, like he belonged among the elite. Wearing the borrowed suit, Jack stepped onto the first-class deck where everything gleamed with elegance and precision. The guest, dressed in their finest, moved with practiced grace. From across the room, Rose spotted him and her breath caught. In that moment, Jack looked like he belonged. She walked over, took his hand, and proudly introduced him to the others, one by one. At the dinner table, conversation flowed. Rose subtly guided Jack through the etiquette, signaling which fork to use and when to sip. Jack, though slightly out of place, held his own with charm. When asked about his life, he smiled and said, "Yesterday, I was sleeping under a bridge. Today, I'm dining with you fine people thanks to a lucky poker hand. Life's a gift, and I don't intend to waste it." His honesty and wit captivated the table. Even the most skeptical guests found themselves smiling. After dinner, the group prepared to move to the smoking room for brandy and cigars. Jack politely declined. As he stood to leave, he slipped Rose a folded note. Curious, she opened it discreetly. In Jack's handwriting, it read, "Do you want to see a real party? I'll be waiting by the clock." Beneath the chandelier, where laughter fades and adventure quietly begins. After reading Jack's note, Rose slipped away from the grand halls and found him waiting by the clock. Without a word, he took her hand and led her down to the third-class deck. There, a vibrant party was in full swing. Music filled the air, played by fiddlers and accordionists, and laughter echoed through the room. People of all ages, men, women, children, danced freely, unburdened by etiquette or expectation. There were no rules, no stiff manners, just joy, sweat, and rhythm. Rose's eyes lit up. This was the freedom she had longed for, the kind of life she'd only dreamed about. Jack's friend Fabrizio was spinning around with a girl, both of them laughing wildly. Jack danced with a little girl at first, while Rose sipped brandy, watching with amusement and curiosity. Then Jack turned to her, grinning. "Now you're dancing with me," he said, lifting her from her seat. She laughed, startled, but let herself be swept into the rhythm. At first hesitant, she soon matched his steps, her spirits soaring with each beat. But not everyone was smiling. In the shadows, Cal's valet, Lovejoy, watched them closely. Seeing Rose dance so freely with Jack, he turned and slipped away, intent on reporting everything to Cal, his eyes cold with calculation and a hint of quiet disdain. After the party, Rose returned to her room, still glowing from the night's excitement, but her mother was waiting and furious. When Rose admitted she'd been with Jack, her mother launched into a storm of emotional blackmail. "Since your father died, we've lived in comfort only because of Cal," she said sharply. "If you don't marry him, we'll be out on the street, begging. Is that what you want?" Her voice trembled with pressure, not love. "He's done so much for us. You owe him. And if you ever see that street boy again, I'll never speak to you." With that, she stormed out, leaving Rose shaken. Later, Rose met with Cal, hoping for calm, but instead, he too turned cold. "You don't have to marry me," he said, his tone laced with menace. "But you'll never be with that boy. I'll make sure of it." His words chilled her. The man she was supposed to marry had just revealed a darker side, possessive, controlling, and dangerous. Fear gripped her heart. Overwhelmed and cornered, Rose made a painful decision. She would never see Jack again. While Rose was walking the upper deck with her mother and Cal, Jack appeared suddenly, gently pulling her aside into a quiet room. But Rose, her face cold and distant, refused to speak with him. "It's over," she said firmly. "I'm engaged to Cal. I love him. You shouldn't come near me again." Jack tried to explain, to pour out everything he felt, but she turned and walked away before he could say a word. Desperate to see her again, Jack wandered the ship, hoping for a chance. Eventually, he made his way to the first-class deck near Rose's suite, but the guards blocked his path. Cal's valet, Lovejoy, appeared and handed Jack a $20 bill. "Take this and leave," he said with a sneer. Jack refused. Without hesitation, Lovejoy gave the money to a guard, who grabbed Jack by the collar and shoved him out. Humiliated and heartbroken, Jack stood at the ship's bow, gripping the railing as the cold wind stung his face. Rose was gone, and he didn't know why. Meanwhile, Rose sat alone, her face clouded with emotion. Thoughts of Jack lingered in her mind, stirring a storm of doubt and longing. Her life, so polished, so controlled, suddenly felt like a cage. What was the point of luxury without freedom? Of appearances without joy? Unable to ignore her heart any longer, she found Jack on the deck. "Jack," she said softly, "I've changed my mind." She tried to explain, but Jack gently took her hand and led her forward. "If you trust me," he whispered, "close your eyes." Rose obeyed. Jack guided her to the railing, helped her step up, then joined her. With the wind rushing past, he stretched her arms wide and said, "Now, open your eyes." She did and gasped. The ocean stretched endlessly before her, the sky wide and wild. "I'm flying," she whispered, breathless. Jack held her close, whispered poetry, and kissed her. The night embraced them, and Rose led him to her room, her heart finally certain. In the quiet of her room, Rose revealed the heart of the ocean to Jack for the first time. Its deep blue shimmer caught the light as she softly said, "I want you to draw me wearing this. Only this." With quiet resolve, she removed her dress and lay gracefully on the sofa, the diamond resting against her bare skin. Jack, nervous but focused, sat before her and began to sketch, capturing every delicate line with care. Decades later, the older Rose recounted this memory to her listeners, her voice trembling with emotion. As she spoke, she touched the objects from her past, each one a fragment of that unforgettable night. Her audience listened in silence, tears glistening in their eyes. But as the story turned, so did the tone. The romance gave way to a haunting chapter, one filled with fear, heartbreak, and chaos. Rose's voice grew heavier as she continued. When the sketch was complete, Rose wrote a letter to Cal and handed Jack the necklace, asking him to lock it away. Then, hand in hand, they slipped out with a plan. If the ship docked, they would escape together, start anew, and build a life of freedom and love. Just as Jack and Rose were planning to run away together, they suddenly crossed paths with Cal's valet, Lovejoy. Quickly slipping away, they dashed through the engine room, weaving between pipes and steam until they reached the cargo hold. There, tucked among crates and goods bound for America, they discovered a vintage car, sleek, elegant, and untouched. Laughing breathlessly, they climbed inside. Jack slid into the driver's seat and joked, "Where to, miss?" But Rose wasn't in the mood for games. She leaned in close, her eyes full of emotion, and pulled Jack toward her. In that quiet, hidden space, their connection deepened. They shared a moment of intimacy, tender, passionate, and filled with the weight of everything they felt but hadn't said aloud. It wasn't just passion, it was trust, freedom, and the feeling of truly being seen. After leaving the car, Jack and Rose ran into Cal's valet, Lovejoy, who was searching the ship for them. Laughing, they slipped past him and disappeared into the corridors. Reaching the upper deck, they kissed beneath the stars, lost in the moment, unaware they were being watched. Meanwhile, Cal entered Rose's room and discovered the sketch Jack had drawn, carefully placed in the safe. Alongside it was a note, "Now you can lock both of us in your safe." Cal's face darkened. A cruel idea took root, and he immediately set Lovejoy into motion. That night, 2 watchmen stood at the ship's bow, scanning the icy waters ahead. Their job was to spot danger icebergs, especially, but their attention drifted. Below, they noticed a young couple wrapped in each other's arms, seemingly immune to the cold. One watchman nudged the other and joked, "They're heating up the whole deck." They chuckled, their breath fogging in the frigid air, unaware of what loomed just beyond the horizon, an enormous wall of ice, silent and deadly, waiting in the dark. Jack and Rose were kissing each other with all their heart, lost in a moment that felt infinite just before everything would change. Suddenly, the watchman at the bow suddenly spotted something terrifying, an enormous iceberg looming directly ahead. They immediately rang the warning bell and phoned the bridge. "Iceberg, right ahead!" came the urgent cry. The officer on duty, startled, rushed to respond. Orders were shouted. Hard to starboard. The engines were reversed and the ship's massive propellers began to slow. The crew tried desperately to steer Titanic away from the ice. The ship began to turn, but it was too late. The iceberg scraped along the starboard side, tearing into the hull below the waterline. In the engine room, workers heard the groaning metal and felt the jolt. Water burst through the gashes, flooding the lower compartments with terrifying speed. Panic began to spread as the crew realized the damage was severe. Above, passengers felt a strange shudder ripple through the ship. Most didn't understand what had happened, but Jack and Rose did. Still holding each other, they felt the impact and looked toward the sea. The iceberg had struck, and they were the first to sense everything was about to change. They kissed again out of fear, silent warning carried on the wind. As water began flooding the engine room, the crew made a desperate decision. They started sealing it off from above to prevent the water from reaching the upper decks. But inside, hundreds of workers were still toiling, unaware of the looming danger. Panic erupted as the heavy doors began to close. Some managed to escape, but many were trapped, the rising water swiftly swallowing everything in its path, cold and merciless. Meanwhile, the ship's captain awoke to chaos. Officers rushed about, their faces pale with fear. "What's happening?" he demanded. A watchman quickly explained the collision and the damage. The captain's expression darkened. He realized the unthinkable. Titanic had suffered a fatal blow. Before the voyage, he had proudly declared that not even God could sink the ship. Now, that confidence drained from his face. The ship he believed unsinkable was taking on water fast, and he was powerless to stop it. His pride, once towering like the vessel itself, now gone. Meanwhile, water began flooding the third-class deck. Panic spread as passengers, clutching their belongings, rushed upward in search of safety. Above, the upper-class passengers remained unaware of the danger, some even laughing and tossing chunks of ice across the deck, mistaking the situation for a curious spectacle. Jack and Rose, realizing the urgency, hurried to warn others. As they climbed toward the upper levels, they overheard officers confirming the ship was in serious danger. Rose turned to Jack and said, "We have to warn my mother and Cal." But before they could leave, Lovejoy appeared and secretly slipped the stolen diamond into Jack's pocket. Unaware, they moved on while chaos crept closer. As Jack and Rose entered the room, Cal accused Jack of stealing the diamond locket he had gifted. The officer searched Jack's pocket, and to everyone's shock, the locket was there. Jack stood stunned, unable to believe it. Branded a thief, he was arrested on the spot, taken away and tied up, unaware he'd been framed by Cal's valet. Meanwhile, the captain, his officers, and the ship's engineers gathered around a map, urgently assessing the damage. After careful analysis, they realized the unthinkable. Titanic had less than 2 hours before it would be completely submerged. With no time to waste, they ordered the lifeboats to be lowered into the sea and began the rescue operation. Word of the ship's fate quickly spread among the passengers. Panic erupted. People rushed through corridors, clutching loved ones and belongings, desperate for safety. To calm the chaos, the ship's musicians played soothing melodies, their notes drifting through the cold night air. Rose's mother and Cal anxiously waited for a lifeboat, but Rose quietly slipped away, determined to find Jack again before it was too late, no matter what. Danger loomed for Jack as Cal's valet stormed in, pistol in hand, and began beating him in a fit of revenge. After the assault, he slipped the handcuff key into his pocket and left Jack behind, bound and helpless. Moments later, icy water began seeping into the room. It rose steadily, inch by inch, as Jack struggled against the cuffs. Panic set and he couldn't escape. Trapped and alone, he realized the grim truth. He might drown here. The ship was sinking, and unless someone came, his life would end in that cold, flooding chamber. Rose searched desperately for Jack, not knowing where he was being held. She ran through the flooding corridors, calling his name, refusing to give up despite the rising water. The deeper she went, the more dangerous it became, but her determination never wavered, driven by love, fear, and the hope of saving him. At last, she found him handcuffed inside a locked room, water already creeping in. Frantically, she searched for the key but found nothing. Refusing to leave him behind, she rushed out and spotted an axe hanging on the wall. Grabbing it, she returned, her hands trembling but her heart steady. With Jack guiding her, she swung the axe with all her strength. Miraculously, the handcuffs snapped open without injuring him. Jack was free. They didn't waste a second. Hand in hand, they fled the room, but by then, the water had risen dangerously high. The ship was sinking fast, and their fight for survival had only just begun. Meanwhile, Jack and Rose found themselves trapped with no clear way out, as the Titanic had already sunk halfway into the sea. The crew prioritized first-class passengers and women for the lifeboats, while third-class passengers were locked behind gates, left in panic and confusion. Jack and Rose reached one of these barriers and reunited with Jack's friends Fabrizio and Tommy. Determined to survive, the four of them searched for another exit, only to find more locked doors. They broke through the barrier with a sofa and escaped. Meanwhile, Cal and his valet returned to the stateroom and retrieved the diamond locket and other valuables from the safe. Determined to escape, Cal bribed an officer with money and promises of business shares, securing himself a spot on the lifeboat. As he prepared to board, he spotted Jack and Rose nearby. Jack was urging Rose to get into a lifeboat, but she refused to leave him behind. Cal approached and calmly told Rose she could go with the women, assuring her he and Jack would follow on another boat. Though hesitant to trust him, Rose eventually agreed and stepped into the lifeboat. But as it began to lower, she realized Cal had lied, his eyes cold, his words empty, his promise never real. Her heart pounding, she leapt back onto the ship, breathless and determined to find Jack again before time ran out. Jack rushed to her side and Cal, furious, followed. From above, he watched helplessly as Jack and Rose embraced and kissed his control, slipping away along with the sinking ship. Cal froze, then grabbed a pistol from his valet and fired at Jack. Jack and Rose ran, dodging bullets as Cal chased them relentless through the flooding corridors. Shot after shot rang out, but the gun finally clicked empty. Out of breath and bullets, Cal stopped, watching them vanish into chaos. Jack and Rose descended into the lower deck as water surged around them. Desperate to survive, they searched for a way back up. They found a possible exit, but the door was locked. Jack tried to break the lock, but it wouldn't budge. Just then, a crew member with the key appeared, trying to flee. Jack stopped him, and the man attempted to unlock the door, but in his panic, he dropped the key and ran. Without hesitation, Jack dove into the rising water, retrieved the key, and unlocked the door. Together, he and Rose escaped, soaked and breathless, but alive, still clinging to hope as the Titanic continued its descent into darkness. The captain moved through the ship with a heavy, troubled face. An old woman approached him, pleading, "Captain, where will we go now?" But he said nothing, just walked on. Reaching the control room, he stepped inside and closed the door behind him. Water had already begun to fill the space. He stood there, calm and still, waiting. Suddenly, the ship groaned and shattered around him. Water burst in, swallowing everything. In that moment, all his pride and silent authority crumbled. He died there, alone. Outside, the Titanic was sinking fast. Even then, Jack and Rose couldn't find a lifeboat. Desperate, they climbed with others toward the ship's stern, which had risen completely upright. Clinging to the railing, they held on tightly, just like the moment they first met. Rose reminded Jack of that memory, even as chaos unfolded around them. People were falling from above, crashing into the freezing sea. The water was so cold that those who hit it froze instantly. From a distance, Rose's mother and others in lifeboats watched helplessly as the Titanic tilted higher, inching closer to its final tragic descent beneath the waves. As the Titanic's stern lifted high into the air, the front half already swallowed by the sea, Jack and Rose clung desperately to the railing. The ship groaned and tilted further until, with a thunderous roar, it broke apart and began its final descent. Both were thrown into the freezing Atlantic, separated in the chaos. Hundreds of people screamed and thrashed in the icy water. Rose struggled to stay afloat when a panicked man grabbed her, but Jack saved her. Spotting a floating piece of wood, Jack helped Rose climb onto it. There was only room for one. Shivering, he stayed in the water beside her, holding on, whispering words of comfort, brushing her hair back gently, determined to keep her alive no matter the cost, even as the icy sea stole the warmth from his body and hope from his eyes. All around them, people thrashed in the freezing Atlantic, trying to stay afloat. But the water was so bitterly cold that within minutes, many froze like statues, their cries fading into silence. The chaos gave way to an eerie stillness. Rose, trembling, whispered, "Jack, why is it so quiet?" Jack, holding her hand, replied softly, "Don't be afraid. A boat will come soon. We'll survive." But fear gripped her heart. Jack smiled. "We were lucky, Rose. Lucky I won that ticket." A lifeboat appeared. Sailors scanned icy water. Bodies floated. One murmured, "Too late." Rose opened her eyes. Jack? No answer. He was gone, his last breath given to save her. Around them, people struggled in freezing Atlantic. Many froze. Rose whispered, "Jack, quiet?" She remembered. Rose tried to call for help, but no sound, only breath, lost in cold. With great effort, Rose grabbed a whistle from a nearby officer's frozen body. Using it, she called out to the sailors searching for survivors. They heard her and rescued her from the icy Atlantic. The next day, a ship arrived to take the survivors aboard. Cal searched for Rose, but upon seeing him, she hid her face beneath a blanket. In this way, Rose survived while Jack sacrificed his life for her. In the present day, elderly Rose finished telling her story. She stepped out of her cabin, holding the heart of the ocean necklace. Remembering everything, she quietly dropped it into the sea, returning it to where Jack now rested. She had kept the necklace hidden all these years. It had remained in the coat Cal gave her during the chaos. He never knew it was still with her. After meeting Jack, Rose discovered her purpose. She lived a full life, traveling the world, embracing every moment as Jack had urged her to. Eventually, her time came. Rose passed peacefully, reuniting with Jack in the afterlife, where love endured beyond time. The Titanic gleams again, restored in memory. Rose, young, ascends the grand staircase. Jack waits, smiling. They embrace, surrounded by those lost. Time fades. Love remains. The ship sails not through oceans, but eternity where hearts never break. And Jack and Rose are forever reunited in their dream.
Follow or subscribe for more videos.